All right. Can everybody hear me? All right.
Yes,
So let me share my screen. Let's see here. I'm now screen sharing. We want to start the slideshow from the beginning. And
I see it. Looks good.
all right. Yeah. Just want to make sure none of the Zoom functions show up. So yeah, once again, I'm Daniel Dean. I am a member of the Archaeological Society of Maryland, just a member. I'm the research chair for Marshy Point Nature Center uh, Council. And I'm also a member of the Maryland Free State Treasure Club as a hobby. Um, then by default, I'm also part of this group as well. So I'm involved in a little bit of everything. And essentially, everything has kind of come to fruition with what I do, just kind of thinking about the future and what we can do to help our park system with this. Um, as many of you know, a lot of the Baltimore County parks work with the help of volunteers. I am a volunteer, I'm not a county employee. Um, and it is a great relationship with the county that we can do so. The only problem is people like me, that had found items at Marshy Point and who tried to, get more involved, and it became a whole big project. If any of you saw my other talk or have, seen me on Facebook or, through Marshy Point, anywhere else, um, we have a program going on now where we are doing archaeology digs and we involve the public. We have a principal investigator, Catherine Fernstrom, who's with the ASM and falls under the criteria. We have the help of, I believe she's in this meeting as well, Jessica Brannick, who's with the county, not the Rec and Parks, but she's with a different division. So we work with a lot of volunteers on a project that for me, I know one day I'm going to be worried about if I were to leave. Um, I don't plan on it. I know a lot of the other volunteers don't plan to either, but God forbid I move to Harford County or any other county and can't keep fulfilling volunteer duties at Marshy Point. Um, I don't want programs like ours to essentially disappear and become stagnant and not worked on. So essentially, this idea kind of is coming at a time where Marshy Point, um, Nature Center Council, and a lot of the other councils are kind of trying to work through some issues with Baltimore County Recreation and Parks. And I thought it would be a nice opportune moment to kind of add this into the mix. We're trying to work with them and figure out what are called MOUs, missions, essentially statements of understanding, not contracts, but where the council and volunteers can kind of fit in with um, the county staff. So essentially, two things that I would like for Baltimore County, the Department of Recreation and Parks to do is hire an archaeologist and hire a researcher to cover the park system, not just nature centers, but all parks in general. You have different functions where, you have Cromwell Valley, you have Lake Roland, you have all these different parks, but you also have ones that are just ball fields. You have ones that are just green space, and all of them are deserving of having somebody overlook or look over these uh, these areas and try to find out if there's any sort of historical context that could be shared with the public. Um, a lot that goes on essentially will not be reviewed, and all of a sudden you could have a ballpark over top something that could be a future archaeological site or a place of importance. So let's get started here. I'm going to show a short video. I kind of made it in a hurry over my lunchtime at work the other day and um, after work yesterday. So hopefully the sound comes through. Pardon the
If there's
cheesy
supposed
music.
to be sound here, Dan, we're not hearing it.
The sound's not that important.
Okay.
There's piano music playing in the background. Picture the Billie Eilish song "What Was I Made For" from the new Barbie movie. That's
Solid
the
choice.
yeah, yeah. I had to find a free version.
Question, Dan, and it's coming in the chat if you can see that. How many other counties have this position?
So there's a few other counties, and I might entail the knowledge of somebody who's attending the meeting at the very end. But essentially, Howard County would be one of the best ones to kind of look at as far as what we have uh, as somebody to benchmark on, and I'll get into that. There's other counties that have it with their record park system, and some of them do it through their departments of planning. So as you picture this nice serene piano music, this is the last bit right here. I was hoping that would be a nice little filler for you, but and I'll have this screen with all the county representatives at the very end as well.
Good, I
So
was going to suggest that. Thank you.
yeah, so and we can leave that screen up so people can copy stuff down. So essentially, the only reason I put this kind of drone footage in is so you could kind of see the expanse of Marshy Point. So Marshy Point has, roughly 450 plus acres to it. A lot of that is woods. Without distinguishing between private properties and the park, I mean, a lot of the land you see in this drone footage is the park. You could see in this last area here, that's our nature center in the parking lot where the little green space is where the walkway goes through and you can kind of see a little shed there. It's smack dab right in the middle of the screen. um, if you go a little bit to the west of that, that is where our archaeological site is, 18BA 623 Cassandra Hamilton. So that's where our dig is actually happening. So you can see how close it was to possibly being developed over with the parking lot and the nature center. If you go a little bit further to the west, you can see where the trees kind of mash up and are a little bit blurry there. That's roughly where there is a 18th century cemetery located within the park. We had the Maryland Historical Trust Department Office of Archaeology come out, and they did a GPR ground penetrating radar, and they found that there were um, multiple, grave shafts there of a full cemetery. The only stone that's marked is Cassandra Hamilton, which turned out to be Cassandra Hamilton. Um, without giving too much history compared to if you were here in September when I gave the presentation last, essentially we have those two major aspects, but we have 450 acres of land that haven't been explored as much yet. So with that, just a little background information. The park was acquired in 1982 by Baltimore County. And there was that headstone, Cassandra Hamilton, on the property, which became known to be Cassandra Hamilton. Her maiden name was Cassandra Bond. Uh, she passed away in 1794, as is on the headstone. You can kind of see a rendition of that there in the image. Uh, in 1992, there was a Baltimore Sun article that mentions the grave's potential to be a history learning point. Um, it took 37 years from the park being, purchased or acquired in 1982 before it was found out who Cassandra Hamilton was. They even had the Boy Scouts um, volunteered and did little trail pamphlets on it, and they kind of assumed in the trail pamphlet it could have been a gentleman who fought in the French Indian War. It could have been, all these different things, but nobody had actually done the research on it. So it was a volunteer, actually me, that figured out who it was, and it took a matter of a few hours on a weekend to figure out. So, there's reasons for delays in projects like this. There could be a lack of resources. I will say, 1982, the internet was not how it is now. It was a lot easier for me to find out this information, primarily because, MD Land Rec exists, and that's, ultimately where I found out who Cassandra Hamilton was because she was mentioned in the deeds up into the, late 1890s, 1898, I believe is the last deed she's mentioned in. However, there could have been somebody, from the county that went and checked that out, especially when there's a Baltimore Sun article where, the person who oversaw the park at that time had mentioned they wanted to make it a history learning point, but nothing was ever done. And that's one of the issues that I have personally with things like this. I loved finding out the history. I loved that it's developed into a project, but without, my involvement in it, there you're missing that history from a county park where somebody should have the responsibility of doing that sort of research and starting those sort of programs on the county end. There can also be disconnect between county entities. There are disconnects, as I've learned, between, what happens during acquisition and what other departments that have historical, aspects and resources to where they don't line up with rec and parks and the responsibilities are separate. So there's another reason for possible delays. You're missing feedback pertaining to the interest. Newly acquired parks may not have, people saying, "Hey, I want to know the history. I want to learn, what's there," because you don't see it. You don't physically see it. So if that's not the first thing on somebody's mind, the first thing on somebody's mind is how can I walk through these trees and how do we make these trails, or how do we conserve where we see that there's pollution in the water. So, you're missing feedback from the public and from the patrons of the park a lot of the time because it's not the visible stuff, it's the stuff underneath the ground that you would necessarily miss. There's also an absence of staff knowledgeable in the subject. So, one of the things that we've done, or I've tried to do from the stuff we found at the park, is have them displayed for the public. All the finds from Marshy Point, except for what we're in the process of trying to document from our official archaeology digs, is on display in the Nature Center. You can go into the lecture hall to the right and take a look at the items in a big glass display case. Ultimate goal for what I was hoping for the stuff, and I actually oversee that as a volunteer. I go and I'm the one, primarily making sure the case is lit up and making sure that the items are still in there. It seems like it's primarily left alone, by the staff, which is good on my end because you don't have knowledgeable staff that can, that know how to handle stuff or, not leave oil resins on copper stuff and things like that. So you have all these different factors that delay the knowledge being spread to the public when you don't have somebody responsible for that, when you leave it up to the public themselves to come in and try to figure it out. So my thing is all parks hold some sort of cultural significance. I don't care if it's a ball field, I don't care if it's any other um, you know, green space or anything else. There is a community that surrounds parks. Parks are meant there for people to come in and become part of the new culture of the park. And parks are meant to be enjoyed and protected. So all parks for me hold a cultural significance. All parks also hold a historical significance. I put that in there because a lot of times for people that do the hobby end of um, whether it be metal detecting, whether it be, lithic hunting, airhead hunting, going places, which I will say, Marshy Point and the nature centers, it is prohibited to do any metal detecting, relic hunting, any of that at the park. So please don't show up there with a shovel and, try poaching items from Marshy Point. But, for places that do allow it, there are parks you could get a permit from Baltimore County, Rec and Parks. Essentially, you have to download it from a club's uh, website that is not part of Baltimore County, and then you have a Baltimore County staff sign off on it. To me, that's another issue. Baltimore County Rec and Park should have the permit located on their Rec and Park site. There should be defined rules and regulations for, relic hunting, metal detecting listed on a Baltimore County Rec and Park site. So that's another absence of, where things have kind of, lacked, in my opinion. On the positive end, archaeology creates a community of with opportunities and projects related to history. For people that live around Marshy Point, we do have a historic African American community. They're listed on Medusa. If you've ever been on Medusa, the Maryland Historical Trust's cultural resource website, there's a great write up. We recently posted about it for Black History Month. And there's a link to it on our Facebook page from February. But you could read the history behind the area surrounding Marshy Point and the park within itself. There is also what's considered a possibly a lost neighborhood in there because there were a grouping of houses as you enter the park that are no longer there. They're grown over with woods, and the only remnants are the, broken glass, a few bottles, and stuff left on the surface. Baltimore County has not done anything with these sites of where these homes used to be, And on one side of the street, I have a contact, and we're working on doing some stuff with the African American community, of trying to remember those people that used to live there. One of them, one of our contacts, she grew up in one of the houses that had a controlled burn, and the house is no longer there. But as far as Baltimore County, um, you know, there wasn't any plans or anything in the works to show that this used to be there. So you walk along the trail and you have no idea. And that's an important thing from the turn of the century, where, a lot of, for the African American community, they came over to work on the railroad tracks that are right by Marshy Point. And, there's still remnants of that along Eastern Avenue. But as far as the park goes, that is something that should have been studied and featured, because it wasn't hidden. It was there right before the park became a park. And, the houses were controlled burned, and they cleared out area, and they cleared out trails. So that goes into the cultural rooting, as you can see and read on there. And you can trace back these properties to original old land patents, and they hold a lot of clues. On the other side of our park is a property called Limerick, and it talks about like 60 young apple trees being on the property. One of the things that we're hoping to do is find a varietal of apple that was existed in Maryland during the 1740s, when the land patent was from, and seeing if we can add a few to our community garden. That's one of my goals. And then, do a panel on that, as far as a nice historical aspect to the nature side of things. But they have clues, and they say where fences were, and, if you're lucky, while you're searching through the land patents. And one of the key things, the fallacies that you come across, everybody says, everything is known, or there's always a map that has it, or there's always, you can always figure it out, even if the stuff isn't there. There's somewhere documentation on it. And one of the things I've learned is, say, for the 1794 direct federal tax assessment that was done, the window tax of the time, the Middle River Lower Hundred, uh, you know, where it lists the direct the houses and the dwellings and anything they were taxed on, where it had a fence and dimensions and everything, has been missing from existence. I haven't found out why, but when you go to the Maryland Center for History and Culture, the state archives, everything says it's the extent, that's it of what is left. And there's the Middle River Lower Hundred is one of those ones where we don't have the site that we're on. We don't have those clues of what it was. There's one random map I came across of the Chesapeake that has a little dot in the area that we have our site at. I made these a little text heavy as I'm looking over them now, but these are some of the reasons why we need an archaeologist and a researcher on Baltimore County staff. These are some of the duties and functions that I could foresee them doing. One of the things I notice a lot of the time as I'm going to parks, and, as much as I'm for and care about conservation and stream restoration and everything, it would be nice if there was a review of these streams that are like Cromwell. You walk down the stream, Mine Bank, it used to be Setter Run, called Setter Run, but you walk down, and you could tell the stream's been, um, the nature aspect has had the positive on it, but a lot of what many people would consider garbage, without looking deep into it, is missing. It looks like there's a lot of fill, there's a lot of stuff, that's been added, and it kind of takes away from that context. Not that it shouldn't be done, it should. I mean, we need to, prevent erosion, and we need all that. But an archaeologist, if we're getting a new green space, could essentially scan, do shovel test pits, do whatever they need to do to kind of glance at stuff before something is done or built. Um, we can touch on that a little bit later, but all it takes is for a pavilion to be put up, and then you're not going to be digging underneath that pavilion. It could be set on top of where a dwelling site was, and you're not going to know, because nobody's going to dig under a pavilion. Stuff should be proactive beforehand. Guide and monitor volunteers from societies such as the Archaeological Society of Maryland. Our PI, principal investigator for the site, is with the ASM, a great asset, and a great volunteer to that. However, once again, volunteers, we have our regular jobs. I don't work at Marshy Point. I have my regular day job where I oversee a coffee roasting facility. And, we only have so much time to put towards certain things and can prioritize. If there was a county archaeologist, for rec and parks, they could be guiding that, and they could be having PIs from the different sites, feeding information to them that they are able to do as part of their daily job of, recording it with the Maryland Historical Trust, recording it with the county, recording it wherever it needs to go, and also foresee and make sure that, the volunteers are doing what needs to be done and in the proper ways. We have lucked out with our site, but, the county's not monitoring what we do. I mean, there's no oversight in that. As much as I'm not a fan of certain bureaucracy, I mean, all it takes is one person who feels that they're, have the qualifications of archaeologists to go in and convince somebody and say, yeah, I want to go and do this, and they turn out to be, not what they say they are or have the qualifications for it. So this is where I don't mind it. An inventory of the assets, the artifacts, is a major thing that we would, that they could be doing. Submitting recommendations for conservation oversight is needed. That's an important aspect for me because we have all these items, metallic, metal items that have been found, copper, lead, brass, iron. Iron specifically. When I took over the glass display case at Marshy Point, you had a bunch of stuff in there that had gotten dusty. They were using it primarily for decoy in the history of the hunting club that used to be there in the mid 1800s. So, I'm going through and they had a little piece of paper and it said a weight from one of the decoys that was from the Wise Kittle family. And that weight was made out of iron. And roughly 80% of that had turned to dust. And it was sitting on a display case in there. Now, there's certain factors that, lead into that where, with corrosion, you need essentially like electrolyte, you need oxygen, you need moisture, you need water. So, when you have something that's iron and unmonitored that came out of an area that has, plenty of, salts in the soil and everything like that, you get what's called weeping iron. And that's what it got. And essentially it rusted from the inside out. There was no monitoring and it was still a pile of dust when I, came about taking over the case to put in the stuff that I had found. So, I had brought this up with the director of Marshy Point, and he's an excellent director, John Lehman. I have only good things to say about him, and just kind of tried to feel out, hey, could we ever have these items sent to the MAC lab for conservation? The MAC lab being the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Laboratory. So, um, and the way they kind of do it with, for the most part, is donation and then loaning back for a number of years, like 5 years or so. And unfortunately, it came back as well, this is a Baltimore County asset. We would most likely not be doing that. For me, on my end, this needs to happen because you have items that you're now responsible for. Aside from the archaeological side of things and the exploration and discovery, these are county assets. And, the one side of things is saying, well, we shouldn't be digging up stuff we can't take care of. And I take care of the stuff that is at Marshy Point and make sure that we do the best that we can with what we have. However, when you add that argument in, you essentially found an excuse to cease all discovery and put in there a way to erase a lot of history by not uh, by being, passive about the whole situation. So just to put that argument out there right up front, archaeology digs should not stop. They should be archaeology digs, research should not stop unless recommended by the people that know what they're doing and saying, hey, we shouldn't do this. Otherwise we are going to go exactly back to how it was and we won't know any history and, stick a pavilion on top of a dwelling and we'll never know the history of it. We'll never discover anything new. So that's mentioned with the archaeologists that they follow standards and guidelines, under Secretary of Interior, historic preservation, like they fall under certain and they know certain criteria of what should happen. With the researcher, essentially they provide support to the archaeologist, they review the assets, they are pulling information and researching the stories, creating the plaques and the panels, essentially, the education aspect of things. Aside from the education people would receive from the archaeology side of things, it would be, panels and plaques people love reading as they walk by on a trail. They like looking at a spot and knowing something used to be there. It connects you with the land itself. So that would be a great addition to that. They could also provide the social media content and do more of the outreach. The outreach being, we have the community around us, we have the county, we have the state, we have the nation. Not going necessarily going that far, but we primarily want people that are in the community to know the history of where they live and if their families have held over for generations in the houses that they live in. However, there's important aspects with, let's say, Marshy Point. The family of the Bond family, Cassandra's father was William Bond, her mother was Elizabeth Stansbury. Stansbury family has an extent in, Baltimore County. William Bond's family came from Harford County. Um, Unfortunately, his father was a Quaker, Thomas Bond of Emerton. If any of you have been up to the Festival of Bel Air, he was a Quaker, didn't mark his grave. There is a high likelihood that underneath the Festival of Bel Air is a Quaker cemetery. So, once again, wrecking parks and, anything that happens on that end, we wouldn't want that to happen to a Baltimore County park. But it shows the extent of the family to Harford County and why it's important for us to find this and why we could share this information with Harford County, especially after the 250th anniversary that they're closing out this month. You have family members that were important in, the colonial era that came from Harford County. Fells Point, the Bond family, William Bond's, brother John and his sister Sarah, and the, Bond Street, Alice Ann Street, and Ann Street all come from the exact same family, and the siblings and the cousins of William Bond and Cassandra, his daughter. So there's outreach, that could be done that would, benefit and connect a lot of different areas. Let's take a look here. So some of the things that must stay the same, in my opinion, we must maintain a symbiotic relationship between county employees and volunteers. Um, so with that, I mean, we are friends with the park director. We work with Baltimore County through him. Um, Everything has been going well because we do a good job with what we do, and he allows us to do the job that we like to do there, and it benefits the community, and everything is done fantastically. That relationship should maintain. They should always welcome Archaeological Society of Maryland, Natural History Society. Everybody should be welcome and involved in the park, especially the community and the public. That's one of the key functions. With this group here, you guys are always welcome to come and do field sessions when we can link up and do whatever at Marshy Point. It is not a small group of people taking over the park. So, with that being said, the on the county side of things, a county oversight really should be involved to reach out and schedule stuff and get things involved with organizations like ourselves, within ourselves. Pitfalls to avoid would be, allowing a project to become stagnant. Once again, that's my biggest fear. If I were to move, if I were unable, there is nobody trying to fill my seat as research chair with Marshy Point. I keep asking people, hey, do you really like history? Do you want to be involved? Do you want to help out? Looking over old documents, looking up stuff on the internet. Yeah, no takers. I mean, I have people that say, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. I'll give you a call or I'll shoot you an email. But ultimately, a lot of us are busy people. I don't fault anybody not being able to do that. But the problem is, if I left there, that case would become dusty and become the next thing that happens like when I took it over. So a oversight from, an archaeologist or researcher, Baltimore County would be, a major thing that should be done. Um, Gatekeeping projects is another pitfall. Um, right now the volunteers have been the catalyst for moving this forward, such as myself and um, Catherine Fernstrom and our president, our council president, Dave Oshman. He is fantastic and gets involved with everything and has sided with history with what we do with this project. So a strong council president like that has been a major benefit. Once again, I believe Jessica Baranek is in the group here too, and she has been volunteering her personal time with our park as well as some others as well um, to this. So, you care about history, you're the catalyst for it. However, it doesn't make it less important, for the future as far as, things go. We need to have that um, pushed forward, even if we're not around, and continued. Um, and the other pitfall I mentioned on here is abstaining from preliminary visits to coincide. So once again, it's that, if a stream's being, restorations being done, conservation, preventing erosion, somebody should go by and glance on that from the archaeology side of things to, or have access to it to glance and say a final look over things, in my personal opinion. Supports and benchmarks. Once again, Archaeological Society of Maryland. The counties, since was mentioned in the chat. I can't see the chat. I see there's two comments on there I missed. I assume this was one of them though. But with the counties, Howard County, they have an archaeologist on staff. Kelly, she's great. I've met her in person. Um, Howard County, they have projects. It's posted on Record Park sites. They have pictures, images. They have programs for the children. They have a lot of different, benefit to their community and to the county with that. Prince George's County is another one. Anne Arundel County and Montgomery County, a lot of these, some overlap with their departments of planning or, other aspects. But as far as an example of a good rec and park one, I always go to Howard County. I haven't viewed too much into some of the other counties, but they do exist as listed on there. The Maryland Historical Trust, the state entity, their Office of Archaeology, all of their other offices there. I mean, they are a great method or a great place to number one.
Looks like we lost Dan. I think this will just be temporary.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, there you are. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, the Maryland Historical Trust. Um, I see here the internet's unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yep, you're good for
Okay.
now, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. It's real windy outside. I have a feeling that's playing into it. So with the Maryland Historical Trust, we have all of them down there. They have helped us and assisted us on our site. Maryland State Archives. I've garnered tons of information, pestering them with emails, and they have provided tons of information that I didn't even know existed. Historical societies and museums. I mean, all of these are different aspects where if you have somebody, that is working on this, whether it be county or volunteer, these are resources where, you have benchmarks set by other counties, and then you have a support system of these other organizations where it's not you're not going out and reinventing the wheel. All right, so on here, Baltimore County, this is a excerpt from a recent article dealing with Cat Sterner's project with Herring Run. You could read in there that essentially, since 1969, at the time of this article, the amount of sites in Baltimore County were 626 archaeological sites. Now, to put that in perspective, our site, Cassandra Hamilton, is 18 BA 623. 623 is the chronological site number. So 623 to the this article in 2024, there was an addition of only 3 sites in Baltimore County for the archaeology aspect of being registered. So that is not a lot, and there are plenty of sites that can be registered and submitted to the Maryland Historical Trust on this. I had contacted, I mentioned, I gave credit here to Jessica Brannick. As of today, she saw 629 sites in Medusa, and they split them out where there's prehistoric and historic sites. The total, what threw me off at first, the total exceeds that, but there are some that carry over as well between the prehistoric and the historic sites. So 629 sites is the main number. You can see the increasing number is not very high compared to Anne Arundel County at, almost 2,000 as of the article, 1,700. So there's a lot of work that could be done, and I come across multiple sites in county parks that have potential for this, and if they had a staff member to start taking care of these, that number could increase, and we could gain exponential amount of knowledge from that. Once again, I come back to the the rules that should be posted by Baltimore County. Um, I'm part of the Maryland Free State Treasure Club. It's a great group of people. The majority of people abide by the rules, and they go to parks. They go to primarily private properties. They go to beaches. It depends on what people are searching for. A lot of them search for modern stuff, so it doesn't necessarily fall into any sort of danger aspect. Um, when it comes to archaeology, a lot of them are just looking for, somebody dropping their, ring at the beach and or their necklace or their phone or whatever. However, you can't necessarily have rules without posting them. Um, I mean, I haven't come across signs about metal detecting. I haven't come across anything on a Rec and Parks County site about metal detecting. The vague aspect of it is a gray area of uh, destruction of property or like, or fauna or anything, the digging up a tree kind of thing, gray area. And sometimes they'll mix it into there. The permit for Baltimore County is a free permit. All you have to do is get a Rec and Parks staff member with a rec, center to sign off on it. And essentially, we just had ours signed at our one of our recent meetings at Victory Villa down in Middle River, and person signed off on it for a year. They take a scan of your driver's license. However, that's not necessarily required. You could go up, you could print out the copy from the website, go to somebody, have them sign it. And I've only been asked at one park, Marshy Point, before I knew that you couldn't metal detect there. Hence the turning over of items and this becoming a project from somebody who would have been considered a troublemaker at first and now is an advocate for this. Um, that is the only place that's actually asked for my permit. So there needs to be more education with the staff members, and part of having an archaeologist and a researcher on staff would guide this and where they could post this online. You should not have to get a Baltimore County permit from an adult club, a community club. It should come from Baltimore County. Same thing with relic hunting. Same thing with privy digging. Privy digging is on the uprise, unfortunately, and I have come across places in state and county parks where it is obvious somebody is digging up um, something, and primarily bottles. They're over near bottle areas. You'll periodically come across that if you walk off trail somewhere. You'll see somebody is trying to pull up what they can from where old home sites used to be. So there needs to be a lot more added in with that as far as posting, signs, posting on the website, and then enforcement of that as well, because that is a big danger. And we need an advocate for that on the county side of things, and that archaeologist and researcher would be part of that. Also, how to report violators if you come across them at a park. If you come across somebody digging at a park and need to know, and there is no nature center, there's no number that you could see associated with the park. It should be listed online easily and accessible. With Marshy Point, it's easy. You call the nature center if they're open. With same thing with the other nature centers. But if you're at a ball field and somebody's digging a big old hole, who most of the time you should have an easy way to figure out who to call if there's a violation with that. And also, if you come across something in a park that you're not necessarily looking for, or and you just come across it, we have something in the display case where somebody came across an old buffalo nickel, an old buffalo nickel from the 1930s, and they handed it into the park. Normally, you wouldn't want to pick up and move an item, a historic relic or anything, but they brought it to the park. This was before my time, and it was in that display case, and it's still with the display case. But how can you report if you find something or if you find a bottle dump to the park? I would love if somebody, if we had somebody, that came across something I didn't know about in the park, contact the Nature Center or contact Baltimore County and say, hey, there's something here. And once again, an archaeologist and the researcher could look into that and determine what was there if it was unknown and you come across a random dump that's needed. So, with all this being said, these are the people that you want to contact and say, hey, this should happen. Um, with Marshy Point and with this whole discussion here, I'm not a political person. I know this costs taxpayer money. I know this is, depending on no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, it's up to you. But these are your district members with Baltimore County, the Department of Recreation and Parks, and then, of course, John Yo. These are the people that you would want to email and say, hey, there should be this. As far as the act now aspect of it, they've been having budget town hall. So these budget town hall meetings, they have a public forum. You go up to a microphone and say, this is what you should include and create in the budget for the county. I attended the one for District 5, which is where Marshy Point falls under and where I live as well. In Parkville, I'm still under District 5 in the section I'm in. And I went and I spoke. I said we should have these two positions for Baltimore County Rec and Parks. So depending on what district you are, my final one, the final town hall meeting, I believe is for District 1, and it is on March 27th. I believe these need to be in prior to that. I mean, as soon as you could send out something, if you decide to send something out, um, send it out as soon as possible because we want it to be seen. We don't want it to be the very last thing as they're going through saying, well, what are we going to suggest or what are we going to, and for my final one, I'm including all of these people. I'm also going to invite them. We have our Marshy Point Spring Festival coming up on April 13th, I believe it is, from 10 until 4. With Marshy Point, I will have a history table. I know our PI, Catherine Fernstrom, has jotted it on her schedule. Check out the Marshy Point Facebook page for additional details on that. But I will have cemetery walks during that, probably at like 12 and probably at 2. If it's slow at some point, I can walk somebody down to the cemetery on my break as well if you can't catch me during the 2 designated for times. And I will have a binder out of, I have over 100 pages of Marshy Point history. You can look at photocopies of old documents. I will also be giving little talks around the display case in there as well. You can see everything that we've dug of interest that we've gone through in that display case as well. Ask questions. On the end of, this is basically the end of my presentation, but my push for these 2 positions really is a push towards the conservation of the items found. It was kind of disappointing to me that, that's where this bureaucracy kind of came into play of, well, they're Baltimore County assets. Well, if they're Baltimore County assets, anything that, you find in the park, then it should be Baltimore County's responsibility of taking care of them. That is a standard ethical thing, because if we're exploring and, it's the duty of Baltimore County, number one, to explore and share the history of the park they oversee. It should also be their responsibility to take care of the items of what has been found in the proper methods. I don't want more piles of dust from weeping iron. I don't want, bronze disease on copper and brass items where it's just corroding, eating, and then spreading onto another piece of copper, brass, whatever. There should be these protections in place. It should be the responsibility of Baltimore County, and they should be acting on it as soon as possible and following what other counties are finding and, succeeding in, as we're behind in this aspect. I think that's all I got for me on my end. Yep.
Thank you, Dan. I'm convinced.
Thank you.
So March
Questions?
27th, you said, is the hearing of and we should urge our representatives like in the next couple days or so.
Yeah, I believe it's March 27th. I believe it's for District 1, which I think is around the Catonsville area. I mean, just do a quick Google search. I mean, you can take my word for it, but do a quick Google search of Baltimore County Town Hall, and it should be the first one that comes up. And there's one meeting left, and I believe it's March 27th. In the paragraph, it says to email prior to your town hall meeting. We're past that point. However, it doesn't hurt to annoy the heck out of them with it, and because no matter what, there hasn't been ultimate decisions yet, and this involves all districts. This is for all Baltimore County, so it doesn't matter who you're emailing. That's why I'm including all of them on my last email of, hey, everybody, this is important to your district, Lake Rolling, everybody, Cromwell, all of your districts have county parks, and all of your districts are lacking history and research to be done on them because of this missing person. So especially in communities that are, um, socioeconomically less than other areas, they're doing a reimagining program with the rec and parks, and that's they're doing it where the councils are having some issues with this, especially nature councils, rec councils. We're dealing with issues with that, and essentially the plan was to cut out chunks of our council budgets. Those budgets are now being funneled through Baltimore County, and they're taking a big chunk of money. Not to get too deep into it, but we're we're arguing against that because essentially we have the freedoms with councils to direct where the money goes. We are very open with the budgeting. We're open. Um, the park director is in our meetings with our councils, and we are very transparent with financial aspects. It has worked well for ours and and other nature centers, not necessarily everybody, but with us, where if our park director says, "Hey, something broke, we need money for it sooner rather than later." The county, it would take longer. We say, "Yep, John, you need it. That's what our money's for." In our nonprofit, overview, it's to alleviate taxpayer money, to support programs that otherwise wouldn't be provided by Baltimore County. So when you take a chunk out of that, it reduces that freedom of us saying, John, the Kubota's broke down, the little vehicle you drive around the park, we can help you fix it, or hey, this needs to be updated, or hey, we're going to build a butterfly garden for you, or whatever. This is where councils come in. So on that separate note, that's why this has kind of come to fruition of, hey, this is happening here, but this is the opportune time to really fight for this, because this is where they're lacking. And if budgets get reduced, that takes money out of my budget for buying the archaeological supplies for our projects as well. I might have to eventually begin asking for grants from Baltimore County for that, which was also mentioned in there. And we kind of want to prevent that, but that's kind of a side issue.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
once this data is gone, it's gone. Once the artifacts are under like a pavilion or something, as you said, there's no way to get them back again. We have to be proactive about it.
yeah, and with our proximity of where the nature center is, just imagine that big nature center you saw in that drone footage there, that humongous nature center, how close it is to where this domestic site that I found was, and where the cemetery is. It seems like a big distance, but the main house was down at the end of Marshy Point, which is partially private property, mainly private property now. However, that nature center is not far from where there could be scattered, artifacts underneath the ground, because this was a big chunk of this was farmland. Where the nature center is and where our domestic site is was all part of a farmed area, if you look at the aerial images from the past. So, stuff is being moved around. So who knows what's lost and underneath that nature center, where it would have been fantastic if the county had an archaeologist to go out there, do a couple shovel test pits, do a surface scan of the area, look through and say, and determine, well, this seems fine, you're good to go, or hey, there's some items here, maybe let's check this out first before put a big building there. We love our building. We love having stuff for the park system, but your checks and balances are gone. So
Comments, questions from anyone? Was there anyone else that wanted to weigh in and add to this discussion? It's just about 8 o'clock, so we can wrap things up. I agree with the comment. Thanks so much for this presentation. Yes, I think a lot of people here are feeling the persuasive power of your words, Dan. So that's what we hope for, right?
yeah, and two of the people attending too, Jessica Brannick, she is an archaeologist with the county, and I believe I saw Catherine Fernstrom in here too, and she's our PI for our site. So
Right, and as I
I'm
said
sure.
in the chat, Catherine is also an NHSM member, as is Kat Sterner. You mentioned Kat's work at
Yeah.
Herring Run Park. She's our collections manager, so there's a lot of intersection here. Great.
Hi, folks. Sorry, this is
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. I just wanted to add that this request for an archaeology position is absolutely in line with the master plan 2030 goals for Baltimore County, particularly Goal 6, Action 2, to develop an archaeological review process to ensure the identification, protection, and management of significant historic and non-renewable archaeological resources, including cemeteries. So, this is work that is long overdue. We're certainly behind other counties, but I really believe we have the public support and capacity to make this happen.
Thank you for that, Jessica Brannock. Agreed. All right, that's a good place to leave the discussion. Thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate you all. Thank you, Dan. We'll be back here next month in the same channel, same time. All right, until then, take care all.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.